In the heart of West Africa, where the dreams of the people are often buried beneath decades of exploitation and silence, a new voice has emerged, defiant, bold, and unapologetically revolutionary. That voice belongs to Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the youngest president in Africa and a man who has become a symbol of resistance, hope, and self-sacrifice for his people. In a powerful and emotional statement, Traoré recently declared, I know I would die someday, but not in vain. These are not just the words of a leader, they are the words of a soldier who understands the price of freedom. They echo across Africa, resounding in the hearts of those yearning for justice, dignity, and liberation. Burkina Faso has long suffered under the weight of foreign interference, economic manipulation, and a legacy of political instability. Traoré came to power not through luxury or comfort, but through the battlefield. He rose from the ranks of the military not as a puppet of the West, but as a son of the soil driven by a vision of sovereignty and unity. Since assuming leadership, Ibrahim Traoré has made it clear his mission is not about personal gain or political longevity. It's about restoring the pride and independence of his people. He has openly challenged neo-colonial interests, questioned the motives of foreign troops operating on Burkina soil, and demanded that Africa take charge of its own destiny. His courageous stand against imperialism has not gone unnoticed. While many world leaders speak in diplomacy and vague promises, Traoré speaks in truth and action. He has expelled foreign military bases, ended unfair contracts, and initiated a Pan-African vision rooted in solidarity. But such bold moves come at a price. With his statement, I know I would die someday, but not in vain, Traoré has signaled a profound awareness. He knows history. He knows the fate of men who dare to stand against global systems of oppression. From Thomas Sankara to Patrice Lumumba, Africa's martyrs were men of principle, and Traoré walks in their footsteps. He is not driven by fear. He is not blinded by power. He is driven by a deep love for his people and an unwavering belief that freedom must be earned, even if it means putting his life on the line. Traoré's words serve as both a warning and a promise. A warning to those who seek to destabilize Burkina Faso and undermine the sovereignty of African nations. And a promise to his people that no matter what happens to him personally, the seeds of revolution he has planted will continue to grow. He has urged young Africans to rise not with guns, but with minds sharpened by awareness, unity, and purpose. He believes the real battle lies in economic independence, educational reform, and African integration. And in the face of threats, pressures, and assassination rumors, Traoré remains unshaken. His schedule is relentless. His speeches are filled with clarity and fire. His message is unwavering. Africa must no longer beg. It must build. Africa must no longer follow. It must lead. While some label him a radical, others see him as the voice of a new Africa, one that refuses to be shackled by old chains. And even as whispers of danger grow louder around him, Traoré marched forward not recklessly, but with purpose. He has asked the world not to remember him as a president, but as a patriot, not as a ruler, but as a servant of the people. And that, in itself, defines true leadership. So when he says, I know I would die someday, but not in vain, we must listen carefully. He's not embracing death. He's embracing the responsibility that comes with leadership. He knows the risks. But he also knows that silence, submission, and inaction would be far more deadly for his country, for Africa, and for the generations to come. The road ahead for Burkina Faso will not be easy. Traoré knows that. But with leaders like him, bold, honest, and willing to sacrifice, there is hope. Asterisk, hope that one day Africa will rise not just in song and spirit, but in sovereignty and strength. Asterisk. And if that day comes when Burkina Faso stands truly free, then indeed his death, whenever it comes, will not have been in vain. Asterisk, in a dusty village in northern Burkina Faso, an old man sits beneath a mango tree, watching children chase each other through the fields. He smiles faintly, his eyes filled with both pain and pride. For years he had watched his people suffer under foreign powers, corrupt governments, and the merciless grip of poverty and terrorism. But now, for the first time in decades, he dares to believe in something again. That belief is named Ibrahim. Traore or EAQ. When Traore assumed power, many questioned how a young captain, barely known outside military circles, could possibly lead a nation plagued by so many crises. But they underestimated the resolve of a man who had spent more time in battlefields than in boardrooms. He wasn't molded by luxury, he was hardened by duty. Asterisk, and in the months that followed, Burkina Faso began to change. Asterisk. One of the first and most courageous actions he took was to break ties with systems that kept the country dependent. He spoke openly about the exploitation of Africa's gold, its land, its people. He exposed the truth that much of Burkina Faso's wealth was leaving the country, enriching others while locals remained impoverished. Asterisk, but Traore didn't stop at exposing injustice. He fought it head-on. Asterisk, he formed community defense groups to reclaim villages lost to extremist violence. He redirected government resources to rebuild schools, clinics, and roads. He created platforms for youth empowerment and opened channels for Pan-African dialogue. Asterisk, and above all, he sparked a new mindset, one where Burkinabe no longer see themselves as victims, but as builders of a nation. Asterisk, but as his popularity grew among ordinary people, so did the pressure from outside forces. International powers, accustomed to a compliant Burkina Faso, began to express concerns. Financial aid was threatened. Diplomatic warnings were issued. Media outlets started labeling him militant, radical, or anti-democracy. But Traore remained unbothered. In his own words, "They will not tell us how to live on our own land. We are not tenants here, we are the rightful owners." That single sentence captured everything his leadership stood for reclaiming. Dignity, without apology. Asterisk, despite limited resources, he launched one of the most ambitious youth mobilization programs in Burkina Faso's history. He challenged young men and women to take ownership of their communities, not through violence, but through service, education, and resilience. Asterisk, and the impact was real. In rural provinces, women began organizing food cooperatives. In cities, university students volunteered for cleanup campaigns and neighborhood security. In schools, children now learned about their African heroes, not just colonial rulers. Asterisk. Traore's vision was not just political, it was cultural. He wanted to restore the soul of a people who had been taught to admire everything foreign and doubt everything African. And he knew this would make him a target. Every public appearance became a calculated risk. His inner circle grew smaller. Security around him tightened. Rumors of plots, assassination attempts, and foreign-backed destabilization plans circulated daily. But Traore never backed down. He once said to a group of young cadets, "What matters is not how long I live, but what I leave behind. If my life ends today, let it be said that I stood for something greater than myself." Asterisk, those words moved through Burkina Faso like wildfire. Farmers quoted him in markets. Students painted his face on school walls. Women prayed for his protection. In mosques and churches, not because he was perfect, but because he dared to lead with truth. Asterisk. For the first time in decades, People believed they had a leader who did not fear the wrath of the powerful, but who feared disappointing the powerless. Asterisk across. Africa, his example is stirring others. In Mali, Niger, Guinea young people chant his name. They see in him not just a president, but a symbol of the Africa they dream of. Free, fearless, and forward moving. Asterisk yes, Traore knows the dangers. But he also knows the power of a people. United. And so, he continues. With each speech, he inspires. With each reform, he challenges the status quo. With each sacrifice, he strengthens the foundation of a new Burkina Faso. Asterisk. So when history writes the story of this era, it may not be about comfort or wealth. It will be about courage, about conviction, asterisk, and about a young soldier-turned-leader who told his people, asterisk, we may be poor in money, but we are rich in pride. And with that, we will build our future. There was a time when the youth of Burkina Faso saw no future. Their dreams were either trapped in poverty or scattered across oceans in search of a better life. Their choices were few: flee the country, join the ranks of armed groups, or simply survive day by day in silence. But now, a new rhythm pulses through the streets of Ouagadougou, through the fields of Bobo Dioulasso, and through the dusty towns once forgotten by history. Asterisk, that rhythm is the rhythm of revival, and it is being led by a man who speaks not like a politician, but like a brother, a son of the soil, Ibrahim Traoré. Asterisk, in one of his recent speeches, Traoré addressed a massive crowd of young people, saying, asterisk, Africa does not lack wealth, it lacks unity. It does not lack heroes, it lacks memory. It does not lack dreams, it lacks the courage to pursue them. But today, we change that. Asterisk, with those words, he ignited something deep in the hearts of thousands. Young people who once looked abroad for inspiration began to look inward too. Their own land, their own culture, their own power. Asterisk, under Traoré's leadership, Burkina Faso is not just fighting for land. It's fighting for a mindset. Asterisk. He introduced policies that redirected millions in public funds from foreign military contracts into local education, agriculture, and innovation. He didn't wait for international aid or permission, he acted, because he understood something simple. Freedom is not given. It is built. And so Burkina Faso began building. In the Sahel region, once dominated by insecurity and foreign troops, new community-run farms are producing food not just for survival, but for surplus. Traoré launched a national campaign called Burkina Feeds Burkina, empowering farmers with seeds, tools, and training. Local engineers, once ignored, were brought in to develop irrigation systems. Soldiers were seen digging trenches for water pipelines, not just holding guns. Asterisk, it was a revolution not of arms, but of priorities. Asterisk, meanwhile, the international community watched with suspicion. They questioned how a young leader with no allegiance to old powers could mobilize so much change in so little time. They tried to paint him as authoritarian, as isolated. But they couldn't explain why his people chanted his name in the streets, not because they were forced to, but because they believed in what he stood for. Asterisk, Traoré was not trying to be another African president. He was trying to be the last of a generation that bows to outside control. Asterisk, he called for a Pan-African alliance, not just between governments, but between people. He said, asterisk, borders are not African, they were drawn with ink in Europe. But our blood, our culture, our pain, it flows across them. Asterisk, that message found resonance far beyond Burkina Faso. In Mali, Niger, and Guinea, flags of these countries began flying together in rallies. People spoke openly of shared destiny, of African unity that wasn't just symbolic but strategic. Leaders began coordinating security, development, and diplomatic efforts without relying on Western intermediaries. It was a quiet but powerful rebellion of the mind. And as always, such movements come with danger. Traore is well aware of the risks. There are whispers of sabotage, foreign intelligence plots, and internal dissent fueled by money and manipulation. But he remains calm, resolved, even fearless. He often says to his team, "They can threaten my life, but they cannot kill this movement. If I fall, another will rise. If they silence my voice, the people will speak louder." And they are. Across Burkina Faso, murals of Traore are painted not as a king or a savior, but as a soldier with his sleeves rolled up, surrounded by farmers, teachers, and youth. His image is not one of superiority, but solidarity. He is building something rare in modern leadership: trust. That trust is why, despite the threats, he walks among the people. He visits schools unannounced. He eats with soldiers at the front line. He listens before he speaks. He acts before he promises. And because of that, the people are no longer afraid to dream. Mothers who once begged for foreign food aid are now managing cooperatives that export crops. Young boys who once idolized foreign armies now join civil engineering clubs to rebuild their villages. Girls who once felt invisible now stand on stages, reciting poetry about freedom, about Burkina Faso, about Africa. This is not a miracle. It is the result of what happens when leadership meets purpose. So when Traore says, "I would rather die with dignity than live in submission," it's not just a statement, it's a spark. A reminder that freedom, real freedom, requires sacrifice, vision, and the unshakable belief that Africa deserves better. And in the villages, cities, and hearts of his people, that belief is now unbreakable. In the diplomatic halls of Europe and the strategic war rooms of the West, there's a quiet unease, one they don't always speak of, but one they feel growing stronger by the day. That unease has a name: Captain Ibrahim Traoré, or EAQ. He is not a billionaire. He is not backed by multinational corporations or global think tanks. And yet, the ripples of his decisions have reached across continents. Why? Because Traore has done something most leaders fear to do. He has declared, in word and action, that Africa must no longer be ruled by those who do not live on its land or bleed for its people. Burkina Faso is not one of the wealthiest nations in Africa, nor the most powerful. But under Traore, it has become something far more important: an example. In a world where global powers have long maintained their influence through debt, military bases, and so-called development aid, Traore has stood up and said no more. When he expelled foreign troops from Burkina soil, the global headlines called it reckless. But on the streets of Ouagadougou, it was celebrated as a declaration of independence, the second independence. Traore's vision for a sovereign Burkina Faso does not stop at his country's borders. He has been a vocal advocate for a West African federation, one free from neo-colonial control, one built on shared security, shared currency, and shared pride. And in this pursuit, he is not alone. After Traore's bold move, Mali and Niger followed suit, forming the Alliance of Sahel States. It wasn't just a military alliance, it was a philosophical revolt against decades of external interference. Three landlocked nations, once seen as fragile and unstable, suddenly began to write their own rules. Together, they withdrew from ECOWAS, an organization many began to see as compromised and ineffective in defending real African interests. They rejected the CFA franc, a currency that tied them to economic decisions made in Paris, and instead, they began crafting their own future. To the outside world. It looked like defiance, but to the people of the Sahel, it felt like dignity. Traore didn't shy away from the criticism. He embraced it. In one memorable address, he said, "If fighting for the freedom of my people makes me dangerous, then I accept that title with honor." And while sanctions, media campaigns unveiled, threats intensified, Traoré's popularity soared. Not just in Burkina Faso, but across the continent. In Senegal, youths carried his picture through the streets. In Ghana, students quoted his speeches. In the Congo, artists painted murals of him beside Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara. Why? Because something deeper was happening. Africa was remembering who it was. Traoré has never claimed to be a prophet or a savior. He constantly reminds the world he is just a soldier, a man doing what he believes is right. But his actions have exposed an uncomfortable truth that many African leaders are afraid to lead without foreign approval. And that is what makes him dangerous, not to his people, but to the system that has fed on African dependency for generations. What a the system that has fed on African dependency for generations. What on rations. What a... Traoré understands, and what he is teaching millions, is this: true independence is not written on paper, it is practiced in policy. So, when Burkina Faso started redirecting aid money into domestic agricultural projects, many doubted it would succeed. But within months, the country saw food production rise. When Traoré partnered with local engineers instead of foreign contractors to build roads and schools, some said it was inefficient. But the results told a different story: projects completed on time, within budget, by Burkinabans. He often says, "What we do with little proves what we would do with much." And it's this philosophy of self-reliance, accountability, and purpose that is transforming not just government policy, but national identity. Traoré's critics often ask, how long can he survive? But his people ask a different question. How long can we stay awake? Because for decades, Africa slept. Its youth believed success meant leaving. Its leaders believed progress meant pleasing outsiders. Its economists believed growth meant loans and dependence. But now, that is changing. And whether or not Traoré remains in power for 10 years or 10 months, his impact will be irreversible. Because he has given language to a generation that had only silence. He has made the people believe, not just in him, but in themselves, and that is the mark of a true revolutionary. So when Traoré says, "I know they will come for me, but I will not run," it is not a boast. It is a final sacred vow from a man who knows the weight of history and chooses to carry it on his back. And from the villages of Burkina Faso to the skyscrapers of Lagos and the townships of Soweto, the message is clear. Africa is no longer waiting. Africa is rising. And this time it will not rise in chains.